Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to another Palaview market research video. Today we are continuing on yesterday's video where we discussed the early history of usury. And if you don't know what usury is, it is the practice of lending money at unreasonably high interest rates. Today, I want to continue this discussion by highlighting more modern examples, as yesterday we covered examples that predated Christ. And I did that to highlight just how old this history is, this ethical question of what is an interest rate that is too high? What is a predatory loan look like, okay? So let's start off with two of the most famous capitalist thinkers, John Locke and Adam Smith, who both in their respective works made very clear distinctions between productive loans and usury. You may be surprised to hear that John Locke supported the idea of regulating interest rates to prevent exploitation. During his time, the legal rate in England was commonly 6%, but Locke advocated to lower it to 4%. He believed that lowering the legal maximum interest rate would reduce the cost of borrowing, stimulate economic activity, and prevent exploitation. Adam Smith supported interest rate caps as well, with the legal maximum in Britain being 5% during his time. He argued that 5% was reasonable and prevented excessive interest rates that could lead to risky lending practices and economic instability. Smith is actually responsible for introducing the concept of the natural rate of interest, which is the average profit that could be made from the productive use of capital. He believed that interest rates should align closely with this natural rate to ensure positive economic growth. Excessively high rates, according to Smith, would attract only the most desperate and high-risk borrowers, increasing the likelihood of defaults and financial crises. Smith, in a separate work titled An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, provided his reasoning where he explains this idea that when interest rates are high, people with capital find it more profitable to lend money rather than invest it in productive enterprises. This may be the only topic, guys, where Adam Smith, John Locke, and Karl Marx all agree. Now, let's move on to one of my favorite historical figures, Napoleon. I would highly recommend this biography by Vincent Cronin. It is definitely one of the best history books I've ever read, not just biographies. And when you read the book, you'll learn that Napoleon possessed this deep belief that money always remained in hiding and only acted through agents who were often unaware of the aims that they were pursuing. He was famous for identifying a pattern that international money stood behind every foreign enemy, mainly foreign aggressors, including, if not especially, small rebel movements like the Jacobins. He is quoted saying, "The hand that gives is above the hand that takes. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain." He was famously clear about how he intended to run the French economy. He defined his economic system to be one that applies its resources towards its values, which effectively meant that it should be used solely to benefit the people for the greater glory of God. The entire economic system was for the maintenance of spiritual values above material values. That's the goal of the economic system, to maintain spiritual values above material values. The nation above political parties, patriotism above greed, and loyalty above fear. He was also very intentional in his belief that the French economy should follow a hierarchical structure. The bedrock of the economy was agricultural for obvious reasons. Above that was industry, which, according to Napoleon, served the purpose of increasing comfort and happiness for the people. That was the purpose of industry in Napoleon's eyes. A distant third was the foreign trade, right, which was composed solely of the surpluses of agriculture and industry. He is quoted stating, "Foreign trade ought to be the servant of agriculture and home industry. These last ought never be subordinated to foreign trade." In modern language, he is saying foreign trade must work to serve the French people, not prey upon them. So as you can tell, Napoleon's meta goal was to ensure self-sufficiency in France through focusing the economy on producing goods for domestic consumption. But to achieve this, he needed to achieve financial independence for France. So under his system, no loans were to be used. Under Napoleon's France, loans weren't to be used at all. Not just usury, no loans, okay? It didn't matter if it was related to civilians or the military. So what was Napoleon's first act after assuming power? It was actually establishing what's called the Bank of France, which was effectively this joint stock company, okay? The bank replaced 15 private banks, which were all immersed in lending during the French Revolution, as well as many other wars leading up to Napoleon's rule. These 15 private banks had increased the French's government debt, so the government debt of France, to 170 million pounds. For all 15 of these banks, over half of their revenues were coming from the interest they were charging on that national debt, which historians believe was between 8 and 10%, could have been actually a little bit lower or higher. We don't actually have great records on that. So this story is the same. It's kind of the same that we're living in today, guys. But if you think about it, it's actually way worse. Private banks, credit card companies, and other institutions are charging ordinary Americans at interest rates that are far above what our great capitalist philosophers in history considered to be ethical. So let's break down the official numbers. 27% of Americans have more than $10,000 in credit card debt. The average interest rate for that population of Americans is 22.63%. And their median income, if they're a man, $61,000 a year, and if they're a woman, $50,000 a year. You don't need to be a mathematician to realize that that just doesn't add up, okay? That person can't pay off those loans, right? And this doesn't include their mortgages or their student loans or anything else. These numbers are also only official as of 2022, and I guarantee they're only way worse right now. The core point here is that if you're watching this video, odds are you were either a part of this demographic or you have family members who definitely are. So what needs to change, guys? What do we need to do? Because something has to change, or something way worse is going to break. And that just might be the spirits of these indebted people. And that may have already happened. My belief is that the history of high interest rate loans is comparable to the history of alcohol. We as human beings go through periods of collective abuse, hence why we have had times of prohibition for both alcohol and high interest loans throughout history. Maybe today is one of those times where the prohibition of interest rates above 15% or even 10% is appropriate, especially since we live in this time of high inflation. The money people borrowed is much less valuable today than when they borrowed it. And they know that, and their government, who is elected to represent them, refuses to acknowledge that reality. That is today's video. We will continue this discussion tomorrow. Thanks, guys.